So you got everything? You don't have any, questions or anything before we get started or anything?
Oh, I'm sure I'll have plenty of questions, but right now I cannot think of any.
All right, and I am very excited to make up the answers right on the fly there.
Excellent. That's the only way to get it done.
So, your character, an elven ranger, is slowly creeping his way through the woods like he do.
Yes.
He is on the outskirts of a settlement that he once knew very well, some 150 years before. Maybe more? It's a little hard to tell.
Yep, it's been a few human generations, which don't last very long.
It's really hard to keep track of for that exact reason.
Now, luckily, they like to name their sons like Frank Jr., Frank III, so I should have no problems finding anybody
That's true.
that is related to people I know too.
So you walk the border of the little town of Amber Sands, as you remember it. You're not a person who gets lost easily. And you recognize that tree, that stump. You remember the lean of that particular boulder over there. You know you're in the right area. Hoping to hear the sounds of smiths at work, dogs barking, children at play. But nothing meets your elvish ears. As you step into the main thoroughfare, it quickly becomes apparent that the grasses are much more overgrown than they should be. Trees overhang into empty yards, and through silent windows, walls have fallen to the elements, and not a soul can be detected in what was once a promising burg of enterprising community. There are houses around you, but there are no souls within as far as you can tell.
Well, this is quite the predicament.
It sure is.
All right. How long does it look like Amber Sands has been empty?
I would say go ahead and make a perception check.
Natural 20 for a 26.
From the flaking of the paint and certain mosses and lichens that are growing on front stoops, places where, under normal circumstances, the repeated footfalls of the comings and goings of the average person would not allow these sort of plants to take hold. These lichens, they take many decades to propagate. You're looking at probably close to 50 years here. That's definitely grown and changed from the little sort of ramshackle frontier village that you remember it to be. But compared to other places that you've been on the island of Crescent, where industry is outpacing the old-fashioned values on which you used to rely. I hate that I said that. You can tell that the development of this place is somewhat behind some generations, human generations, of course, like dog generations, basically.
Yeah, of course.
Some decades behind the development of other places that you have seen and been disgusted by in your return to the island of Crescent in its modern form. This place has been abandoned for a while.
Well, I suppose if it's been about 50 years since anybody's lived here, that everything is basically returned to the earth at this point, I would like to look around to see exactly what happened to Amber Sands, whether it was the people just left in a mass exodus or if somebody came and attacked them. I want to get down to the brass tacks.
Okay. I would say that it's morning, and what you can do is you can take some time and do an investigation check.
All right. I am not good at those. 13.
13, okay. So you prowl around the edges of the town and even sort of meander into the village proper among tufts of grass that are growing up from between the cobblestones that had been laid down. You peek into houses, most of which the windows are gone, having been smashed and just sort of degraded through a lack of maintenance. There's no furniture inside of these houses, from what you can see. There don't seem to be any leftover belongings. You don't find bodies lying in the street. You do not, in fact, particularly see signs of a struggle. It's as though the entire population, possibly at varying points, you're not too sure, you don't know that it happened all at once, just sort of outgrew the place and left.
Okay, well, it's good that they hadn't been attacked and raided, so that's at least a good thing.
One thing that you do find as you near what seems to be the town square, in the center of that square, there's a little highly overgrown sort of verge in the very center, built of brick with what may have once been flowers, but it's now definitely like overgrown weeds. I'm sure you approve.
Yes.
And on top of that, a statue, sort of mossy now, covered in bird shit, but it is of what appears to be an elven figure, a very familiar elven figure, with a hand outstretched.
All right, I'm gonna approach it and see if I can make out more of the details.
You do recognize the figure. You recognize the furs. They were furs that you yourself once wore many hundreds of years ago. Down the bottom, almost invisible underneath the growth of moss and lichens, you can read the etchings, a sort of a title for the piece. It says, I'm actually not 100% certain on how you pronounce your name.
Ost.
It's Ost. Okay, I was like, Ost or Oust? Do we want to have the Smog-Smaug argument here? Ost the Austere. That's all it says.
Oh, they're getting... Humans always try to be so fancy.
You remember this community was largely humans, but there were also dwarves, gnomes, and the little bat people, the Cairo. Well, you're pretty satisfied at this point that there is no further habitation of this interior village.
Well, that's pretty sad.
So, it's pretty sad. What would Ost do in these circumstances?
So,
it's probably mid-afternoon now.
It's been 50 years. It's going to be really hard to figure out which direction that they actually went off in.
Yeah, you're a little bit beyond the bounds of tracking as a ranger's art.
Is there any map of the area that I've come across, or maybe
you likely have come into possession of a map? Although, I don't know. I imagine you rather begrudgingly prefer not to rely on it. But yeah.
Well, my map. I assume that my map is also very old.
Yeah, your map would be very old. You come to wonder if, in fact, newer maps even have what apparently remains of Amber Sands on it at all. 20 miles north by northeast of the city of Guildkeep, which is one of the places you've kind of been avoiding. It was even possibly too urban for you some 150 years ago. You can't imagine what it would be like now.
Yeah, that's not ideal.
That's probably the closest one on your map, the closest settlement on your map. Okay, so you sort of trek your way south, as always, listening to the birds and the bees and the various sounds around you to sort of gain hints about what is going on about you. And not a half a mile outside of what was once the border of the village of Amber Sands, you hear a sound. As you approach, you hear voices among the trees, the crackling of a fire, and you can smell cooked meats. Cooking meats. You can smell cooking meats.
A meat somewhere between rare and well done. Got it. Then yeah, I'm gonna have to approach. This is the first set of civilized people that I've seen since coming around this area. Or smelled in this case.
Quite so, quite so. So, you move a little closer. I presume you're moving rather stealthily.
Yes.
Actually, would you like to roll stealth?
Sure thing.
Stealth has got to be one of your good ones, right?
Yes, that is a 15.
You work your way through the brush, You find yourself suddenly standing in what may have once been a path, a human-built path, not a game trail or anything of the like. Though overgrown, it seems that some have come this way, at least recently. There is a clearing in the woods at the end of it. A dark hole of a cave graces a cliff face at the far end. A small camp seems to be being set up. A handful of gnomes and dwarves mill around, fastening lines and pitching tents, while still others are building a fire at the center. They seem to have just arrived and are unpacking materials from carts, pulled by, simple donkeys. They're sort of chatting back and forth to one another, just loose conversation. It doesn't seem like it's any sort of, say, military thing. It's just, they're making camp before the mouth of this cave.
Like caravans or like merchants' caravans?
It doesn't seem to be a merchant caravan, no. They seem to be workers, and they are offloading supplies, although at this distance you can't tell what the supplies are. These seem like common salt-of-the-earth sorts.
Then I'm gonna approach them. I'm gonna stop being stealthy and just come up.
Okay.
Bow slung, so they shouldn't feel any need to be wary of me.
And what do they see when they look up at this new sound and sudden sensation of a figure approaching them?
So Ost is about 6 feet tall. Actually, D&D elves, are they tall, short?
I would say that they tend to be a little shorter on average than humans, but 6 feet tall is totally within the realm of possibility. He would be a little tall for an elf, but he wouldn't be like a freak.
Got it. So 5'11", medium build.
5'11" is way less than 6 feet. As someone who is 5'11", I know this. Sorry, go ahead.
That's where they got the saying, if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. So
Yep.
5'11", medium build. He is almost completely covered, other than his hands and his face, in furs, greens, browns, dirt, even up on his face, just completely covered in it. But not like, as he approaches, it's not an unpleasant smell. It's very earthy, like freshly tilled soil. But his bow and his backpack do look very well taken care of.
So when they look at you, they don't see a muddy, sticky monster. They just see a person who is clearly at home among the greenery of the earth.
Yes.
There are a few folks a few gnomes and a dwarf who sort of stop what they're doing and then just sort of like whisper among themselves as you approach. Probably the most disarming reaction is of a gnome that is sitting by the newly built fire, upon which people are still bringing some brush to help build it, where he is turning a small spit that has a rabbit on it, and that is probably the cooked meat smell that you were smelling earlier. He sort of looks up at you, brightly and interested, and he says, hello. You're not one of ours, are you?
I'm gonna walk up to him and I'm gonna sit down.
Yeah, there's logs arranged around the fire.
No, I dare say I am not. I just happened to be passing through, trying to visit the old hamlet of Amber Sands, only to find that, well, there's nobody left there.
At the mention of Amber Sands, he kind of lights up a little bit and he says, "Oh, you're from Amber Sands?"
Well, no, not from, but, I visited there, say, century and a half ago.
Century and a half ago? Wow. Well, I mean, you do seem kind of familiar. I mean, have you been there? I'm sorry, I should say, my name is Tennis. I was born in Amber Sands.
Now, you don't say.
Yes, in fact, I do say. I'm starting to copy your accent.
Oh, well, sometimes you just gotta ride it out.
And he says,
Well, you do seem sort of familiar, but I'm only about 60 years old, so centuries. I don't think so. Have you been by more recently than that?
No, this is the first time I've been back in that time. Although, nah, I helped out the founding folks back in the day.
His eyes widen a little bit.
You're not Oust, are you?
Well, it's us.
Oh, wow, we all said it wrong.
Well, sometimes it's just kind of lost to time.
Well, perhaps you remember my grandmother, Teneria. She was she was the quartermaster for the original settlers in this area.
Do you have a vague memory of a sort of like a grouchy, middle-aged, gnomish woman who was a little bit uncomfortable with having you help, but eventually warmed up. Sort of proud, not really wanting to take help from outsiders.
You said her name was.
Teneria. He's Tinnis, she was Teneria. It was too late for me to name him Tinnis the Third, so.
Yeah, I remember that little firecracker of a woman.
I'm afraid she passed away some 30 years ago, but yeah, she spoke very highly of you. Everybody did.
Well, I am very sorry for your loss, Mr. Tennis.
And it's all, the world turns, everything changes.
Well, sometimes it changes more than you like. And speaking of, what happened to the town?
Oh, well, the resources kind of dried up after a little while, and things were going big in the big cities, so, over time, people just kind of moved away. And of course, there was the incident at the mine that, sort of threw people off. There was a few folks who died, and nobody ever really figured out why. Actually, that's part of why we're here today.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, he kind of gestures over at the cave, and now you can see that there's more than just the handful of folks that you see out here. Some of those folks, some of the gnomes and dwarves, are actually heading into the cave, and you've seen a couple people out, and they've given you strange looks, but nobody's really given you any problems yet. Tinnis is still sitting here turning the spit.
Yeah, there's some folks in the city. One Professor, oh gosh, what was the name? Tinker Breath. Yeah, you don't forget a name like that.
Yeah, it's definitely something.
Yeah, I haven't met them personally, but they contracted us to come out here and sort of check out the old mine, see if we could clear it, get it up and running, that sort of thing.
I don't know. The city folk, run into the city? Now listen, I don't mean to preach, but them humans have a saying where if you give a man a fish, then you feed him for a day. If you teach a man to fish, then you're gonna feed him for his whole life.
Yes. My father used to repeat that to me, actually.
Now that's what I did. Like I helped those people learn how to fish. They went out there with less than adequate resources, and just how did they forget? As time passed?
I don't think it's anything as simple as that. I think maybe somebody came around and taught them a different kind of fishing.
There's only one way to fish, son.
Well, I'm not a fisherman. I can't comment. I'm just a, guy with a shovel.
Oh, well, that's an entirely different skill set, but okay. What kind of mine was it?
Oh, all kinds of things in there. A little bit of copper, a little bit of iron, not too much of that. Some coals. I think somebody mentioned bauxite, but I don't really know what bauxite is. And there's also like this really cool like glowing stone. I don't know if it's actually good for anything, but it was a little bit of a curiosity. Probably some kind of magical thing, and I don't know if it was good for anything, but they used to pull it out of there and sometimes folks from the city would come around and pick it up, and they just thought it was absolutely the bee's knees.
Well, usually when something in nature's glowing, it's not meant for being picked up and looked at.
Yeah, well, always chasing that gold coin, I suppose.
Gold coins. That's one of the silliest things I think that they ever came up with.
Well, you may be right. But, it's not our world for that. We just gotta kind of survive in it.
I suppose.
It's at around this point that you start hearing yelling coming from up inside of the cave up here. The group stands. Anybody who is not, like, immediately already walking around, they all sort of stand as they listen to this yelling. You can't really make it out. It's very indistinct. It sounds like it's coming from a far ways away. But it sounds scared and pained.
From inside the tunnel, you said?
From inside the tunnel. As you're still sitting, sort of griping, people start to put down what they're doing and start running toward the cave mouth. Even Tinnis stands as well. He's like, Did you hear that?
Yep.
Okay.
You checked to see if there was anything living in the caves before you sent someone down there?
He starts walking off towards the cave, not as fast as everybody else. He says,
Well, we just arrived here. We're setting up camp. A couple people went in to check, but hold on. I think I probably should go check this out.
Us is gonna walk with them.
Okay.
But I would like to roll to see if there's anything other than humanoid footprints, just to see if anything else might be living in there.
Give me that great golden survival roll.
Excellent. 22.
22. Okay, so it's a little muddled because obviously a lot of people have just disturbed the dirt and the dust and have gone this way. So you see a lot of humanoid prints, but sort of like interspersed among them, you could see almost these sort of conical depressions in the dirt. Small. Like, say, maybe like on the order of your fingertip, but like pointed. And they remind you a little bit of an insect or an arachnid's prints.
So, and the question is it 6 of them or is it 8 of them?
With a 22, you can tell that you are looking at individual. You can make out 1 or 2 good individual prints, and you can tell that they're about 6, and probably about, you want to say, maybe a little bit bigger than the span of your hand.
Okay, then I'm gonna look at Tinnis. Well, it looks like you got some kind of giant bugs in there.
Bugs? Well, that's not good.
He hurries in after you. I would say, at this point, as you are speaking to Tinnis, you're just right behind him right there, yeah. And all this kind of happens in a flash. You see a half-orc inside the cave. One of those that you've seen sort of coming into and out of the cave, speaking with people, moving supplies around, that sort of thing. He is standing some 10 feet in front of Tinnis. Something, again, fair to decent small, almost sort of like leaps up and catches him in the chest. And he yells, and the others around him turn and yell. And it's like, okay, it shouldn't be that bad and everything. Except there's something wrong about this insectoid creature. It almost seems to be glowing from within. And in a flash, it seems to sort of swell, and you can tell what's about to happen. You believe it's about to explode. You have time for a single action.
All right, I'm gonna grab Tinnis. His comrade in arms are unfortunately likely lost already, so I'm gonna pull him around the corner here.
Excellent. Okay. He doesn't particularly resist, but go ahead and make me a strength check if you don't mind.
Strength or athletics?
I suppose athletics makes sense. It's kind of a grapple.
23.
All right, so you sort of just kind of like grab him by the scruff of the neck, by back behind his collar, and he's a lot smaller than you. So you basically just grab him like you would like a tiny dog and just sort of like whip him around behind you. And yeah, exactly what happened, what you thought was going to happen, happens. there is a massive explosion from inside of the cave. There's like a ringing in your ears, and as audio sort of swimmingly comes back, you can hear like moans and cries from within of pain and despair. You also hear the clicking and clacking of rock and stone, which suddenly starts to build and grow and stuff like that. And next thing you know, you're being pelted with rocks and stone as the cave mouth caves in.
Well, Tinnis, sorry about your loss.
Tinnis is dazed. He's lying on the grass and he just kind of like looks up. His ears are actually bleeding a little bit from the concussive blast. And he kind of sits up and he just like looks on in like horror and awe as like a tear starts to streak down his cheeks there. And he's like,
Oh no. Oh God, what do we do?
Well, there's not much you can do.
He clambers to his feet. He's shaking. This kid looks like he's about 60 years old in gnome years, which is not very old. It's kind of like a 20-year-old.
Yeah, barely an adult.
It was apparently an adult, but you could tell that he was kind of like the lower rung of the ladder there. He is bleeding. He is covered in dirt and dust. His eyes are wide and watering, and he is shaking. And he's like,
I have to go. I have to go. I have to go. I have to go and tell them. I have to tell them what happened.
Hold on. Just a moment now. Austin's gonna grab him, put both hands on his shoulder, and look him in the eye. So he's kneeling at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you're gonna need to calm down before you do anything.
How can I calm down? How can I they're buried under there. Something exploded.
You're gonna breathe. Slowly breathe in, deeply, then breathe out.
I know how to breathe. But okay. All right, I'll do it.
he breathes a little bit. He starts to calm down a little bit. He just needed something to anchor him a little.
I stand by it, though. I have to go back.
And how far away is back?
Some 20 miles. We started yesterday, and it took a little while to get everything all together, but that was all of us coordinating, and there's just one of me now, so...
So 20 miles, that's gonna take you a while. So how dense is the rubble?
The rubble seems to pretty much go from the bottom to the top. It's as though, like, say, like the first 10 to 15 feet of the cave itself just collapsed inward. If it weren't for your sort of skills at understanding what's going on around you in nature, you probably wouldn't know there was ever a cave there.
But if we start going at it with shovels, it's just going to take a very long time to free up, right?
Definitely.
Plus, I don't know that I want to go in there. That was like some sort of little creature and it exploded.
See, glowing things, they're never good.
I am starting to see your point on that.
At this point, he has sort of made his way over to one of the donkeys, which some of the donkeys actually at the explosion sort of like actually managed to tear the stakes out of the ground that they were lashed to. At least one of them didn't, and so the other donkeys are kind of like wandering the hillside now. You could hear them sort of braying off in the distance. But one of the donkeys is still around and has, some stuff on its back, some mining equipment, that sort of thing. He goes to offload the equipment and tries to heft himself back onto it, but he does that thing sort of like where he ends up flat on his belly on the top, and he's just kind of like sort of starfishing around trying to get his other leg up on the back of the rump.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna help him up.
All right, okay, all right, thank you. All right, thank you, that's all I needed.
Well, not quite. So, tell you what. You head on back to town. I'm gonna do what little I can here, just to see, and I'm gonna come and find you once I'm done.
Here, let me,
He kind of scrabbles around in his pocket and he finds like a crumpled up employment contract which has an address on it, and he hands it to you.
He says, "This is the address of the person who contracted us. If you find your way back, that's probably where I'll be, or at least I'll know where to find me."
All right. Well, I wish you a much safer journey than you've been on, Mr. Tennis.
Thank you. I listen. It's an honor to meet you. I just wish it was under better circumstances.
Well, I do too.
He's gonna go ahead and head off on his ass.
I'm also gonna cast Longstrider on his donkey.
You're gonna cast Longstrider on his donkey.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yep,
All
10
right.
extra feet for an hour.
Whoa.
And any of the other donkeys that are still here, I'm gonna put them to work.
After a little bit of time, I'm not even going to make you roll animal handling. These are domesticated creatures, and you're a damn ranger. You know how to deal with them.
Yep.
And what exactly is it that you are trying to accomplish?
I am trying to not get the entire thing unblocked, just enough that I can see what's going on inside. But I'm hooking up the donkeys with ropes, breaking some rocks, and then basically having like a slingshot. Not a slingshot, but wrapping up rope like one, and then having the donkeys pull the top of the rubble down.
You can handle the smaller stuff. They can handle the bigger stuff. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Go ahead, and I would say make a... Man, what kind of check would that even be?
Profession minor check.
I don't think that's the thing. I think actually for this, I would probably have you do, and I'm going to go back on what I said before, and do an animal handling check, just sort of like a general one across the period of time that this job is going to take.
20. Unnatural.
20. All right. So you work for a while. How much time are you willing to put into this?
As much as it takes.
Okay. You work and you break. You sleep over the night.
I eat that rabbit.
You eat that rabbit because he did not grab the rabbit. That's not bad. Kid's a decent cook.
Right.
And somewhere about halfway through the next day, you start punching through. At the very sort of top of the rubble pile, you punch through and you can get into the sort of the darkness beyond somewhat. The air is fresher than you expected. It seems to indicate a much larger space, possibly with other outlets. Or at least some sort of ventilation, but you can see into the darkness beyond. It's going to be a while later before you would be able to do anything like fit yourself through it.
Okay, that's all right. That's not what I would like to accomplish.
Okay.
I assume that there's a lot of supplies here.
Yeah, there's definitely some. I mean, there was some that was still on the donkeys that you probably took off of them to get them to go to work and stuff. As well as a lot of stuff that's been unpacked and laid across the ground.
Oil?
Yeah, oil for lanterns, for lamps.
Okay. What I would like to do is, if there is rope, I would like to soak it in oil, attach it to an arrow, and then shoot it down the path. And then I'd like to light it from my end, so that way I have a clear line of sight inside the tunnel.
I think no roll's necessary for that. You're trying to shoot it down a dark area. So, there's a tunnel, as you say. You go ahead and you shoot the arrow down it. You're a little disappointed with how far it goes. It definitely hits a wall before you would have liked. So you know you're not going to get a lot of stuff out of this. It definitely doesn't go the full 50 feet of the hempen rope that you were able to scrounge.
Light it up, get some light in there.
You light it up. First thing that comes to light is a lot of rubble and what seems to be the occasional head or arm. Some of it sticking out from underneath the rubble, some of it disparate and hanging out on its own. You also, after a moment, as this rope lights up, and the fire sort of flows to the back of the room and across the coils of where like the rest of the rope kind of lies. Probably some 30, 40 feet. You can see an opening on the left that seems to be a little ways up, and more importantly, you see movement. You see a handful of tiny little creatures crawling and swarming, and they come to investigate the light. They look basically like if ticks were the size of toy poodles.
Gross.
You can hear sort of like that, just like the chitinous noises of their mouth parts and their plates sort of like rubbing against each other as they move. And they check out the fire. There's maybe a half dozen of them at this point, and they start to track the fire back to the entryway with your head poking into the corridor down there. They are heading directly towards you.
I do believe that is my cue to get out of there. Fog
right.
cloud, just because, and then I'm gonna book it.
Okay, you book it. And where are you heading?
Well, I have an address.
An address in Guildkeep, the place you've been avoiding.
Well, sometimes
Fair enough.
you
All right.
say you're gonna do
okay,
something. And
that's my prologue
by
for you.
golly, you
now you
gotta
have an
do
excuse
it.
to be in Guildkeep, and you have a hook into the plot.
And I got to light a rope on fire.
Yeah, you did. It was a lot of fun. All right, I'll catch you later then. I'll catch you very shortly then.
Yes. See ya.